despair. The world is full of joy. You cry, you smile, and you dance. Even though sometimes it's a drag to toil without a gain, you cry, you smile, and you dance. Celebrating life is real, but not without a cry. Celebrating life is good, but not without a smile. Celebrating life is sweet, but not without a dance. Celebrating life with you, with everything you bring. Fly away, my heart, don't despair. The world is full of joy.
1, 2.
You cry, you smile, and you dance. Even though sometimes it's a drag to toil without a gain, you cry, you smile, and you dance. Celebrating life is real, but not without a cry. Celebrating life is good, but not without a smile. Celebrating life is sweet, but not without a dance. Celebrating life with you, with everything it brings.
1, 2. One, two, 1, 2.
Then you switch it just a little.
One. Hello, everybody. We're going to start in a couple of minutes. If you wouldn't mind taking your seats, that would be great. Thank you. Joanne Harding, take your seat.
One, two.
Hello. Nice. Sit down. I'm an MC. If everyone could take a seat now, that would be great. Thank you very much.
taking this in. It's so wonderful to be here, be out of the home office, and connect with all of you. Friends and colleagues, welcome. It's been a long time for many of us to find ourselves in this situation where we can greet, hug, see each other's smiles, and just feel the joy of humanity. We are here today to celebrate a woman that I deeply admire. A human rights activist, a woman who has dedicated her life to giving. She's a dear sister. Welcome to all of you, and I am here with someone who seems to be minded to usually really beautiful, great things. My name is Bongiwe Mlangeni. Welcome to.
Thank you, Bongi, and I just want to repeat what actually see people's shoes. This experience of seeing you in the flesh, I think we will never again take for granted. And it's really special that it's an event intended to honor somebody role, not only in our careers and in our lives, but I think in the sector as a whole. And so, Nicolette, I think you need to start getting used to blushing and cringing a little things said about you today. The event today is going to happen in two parts. There's remarks from Vuyiswa Sidzomo, and I'll introduce her in a moment. And then a conversation between two incredibly impressive women. Nicolette Naylor and Bongi will introduce that. And then we've got some troublemakers who are going to be ring-led by Halima Mohammed. And I'll introduce them. First session, and we'll take a break with some music and an opportunity to chat. And then we have an evening session which includes the Ford Foundation, both live stream but also in person by some important members of the Ford team. And then there's going to come a really beautiful moment when we're going to hear from Nicolette herself. So over to you to introduce. Oh no, I'm going to introduce Vuyiswa, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Of very amazing people who've led the Ford Foundation. I've had the privilege to know Vuyiswa for a long time, actually. Somebody who brings with her a wealth of knowledge and experience. I won't waste too much of your time telling you. Welcome you.
Thank you, Dugan and Bongi. Good afternoon, everyone. It really today. It really has been a while. So thank you for joining us. Bid farewell to our beloved colleague, Nicolette. I'm a crier, so I'm trying. We thought it fitting that, as we bid Nicolette farewell, we take time to reflect on an important subject, especially in recent times, and that is philanthropy, power, and local agency. That we have chosen to talk about this with you all. We believe that it's time that we begin to interrogate together it supports and the ways in which it has caused harm. While, of course, you know, there have undoubtedly been positive shifts in this space over the years, if I just share, you know, an anecdote from my own experience. I started working in philanthropy in 2005, and as Dugan has said, with the Mott Foundation. Of the Africa Grantmakers Affinity Group, which is an affinity group of mostly US funders, which I currently talked about. The way in which colleagues spoke about Africa and Africans in general would be an understatement. And my biggest disappointment was that these were supposed to be the good ones. These were It made me wonder about the effectiveness, misunderstandings about not only the continent, but its people. I mean, they were saying these things to me. That I would make it my business to influence change from within, so I never stopped attending those meetings. At the time, only a handful of. So fast forward over several years, to speak at our conferences about their lived experiences. The nature of the conversations began to change. And this also heavily influenced funding decisions, because these were people who made funding decisions within their foundation. People began to better appreciate how funding in most affected by the problems they were trying to address. And I mentioned this example because when we are deliberate about what needs to be done, the conversations in philanthropy, on philanthropy and power, have been taking place in many spaces over the last several years, and I've been part of some of those conversations, along with my colleagues who will be speaking to us today. Continue to happen in silos. And I think we need to grapple with the cannot do it on our own. We need our partners to also play a part, but that requires effort, commitment, and solidarity. In all of us, and because if we do nothing, excited at the lineup of speakers today, and I would like to thank you, Ma'am, for agreeing to join us today and making the time. It means a lot to us, and I look forward to the pearls of wisdom. And Dugan and Bongi, don't kill me. I know this is not the thank you section, but I'm remiss if I don't mention my collaborators in crime. Becky Moyo from the Center, who was telling me just now, how did I get myself here? Because we kept saying to her, no, you'll make a little speech, and then it expanded. And you know, to curate this conversation with us. This is just the beginning, colleagues, so watch this space. And before I sit down, special guests today. We are joined today by Nicolette's parents. And Nicolette's partner, Dr. Shane Onto. I'm really excited that you've been able to join. And who's been an amazing colleague. Shane, you know this. She's been an amazing colleague to all of us. I hope you will find acknowledged and deeply appreciated. Thank you and welcome everyone.
Yes, she has been an amazing colleague. She speaks her mind. She also unsettles at times, but that's just how things are. So, fuzzy, warm kind of conversation, that's what you're expecting. She's a queen of creating discomfort. The two women who'll be coming on stage are going to, list the accolades they have. I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with both of them. That there is that thing. For example, they are both advocates for gender justice and human rights. Tables, or creating new tables, and in Nicolette's words, were meaningful. They both are committed to social justice, and they give beyond the institutions that they have established. They also are both usually refers to when she speaks, hammer it on us. For those of us who have worked closely with her, we have to pass the baton. And today what we are going, whichever way you want to pronounce it, it's an expression. Yeah, it has happened, and we are expecting time. Friends and colleagues, Grasa, Michelle, and Nicolette Naylor on
If you don't mind, I'll sit this side.
I'll sit this side.
Well, I want really to start by Mama and Papa's for giving us the how we have by give us really the opportunity and to thank you. Let's partner and in words being along the years shared Nicolette with us. Regret when you hear what is going to be said. Nicolette is, you know her as your partner. The impact she has made in the world. And it's about gratitude. It's about deep, deep appreciation. A huge amount of, even in many ways, you have enriched our lives individually, but you have shaped way, institutions established, others they have been working in, but way of building relationships. We were not, as Africans, we were not receivers. So we couldn't even remember that we are dealing with let alone to say an American institution. And we had this empathy. Our own presence, our own journey. In Waterby, I'm not going to discuss this today, but I want to leave it for us to continue discussion whether Waterby. I think we borrowed this sadly express who we are, how we relate to one another. You know, philanthropy suggests that there's somebody who gives and there's someone who receives. But our definition is sharing. Everything we do, we just share. We don't have this notion of so it's not the day to discuss this, but I'll leave it on the table of many of us to discuss much later. Should we call it really philanthropy because it sounds good to others, or should we call it what expressed for us this experience, this fulfilling experience of sharing, simply sharing? Anyway, 16 years of your life. You started, you were almost a little girl. And here you are now, a very mature young lady. I was shocked when I met you downstairs because I thought perhaps I was mistaken. You're still so beautifully young and exuberant, and how did you manage, I mean, to go across all these years and keep yourself not only internally, but even outside? You kept yourself exactly how you want to be. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Thank you, Mom. You promised you wouldn't make me get emotional, and you started right off by getting me emotional.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Firstly, it's so wonderful seeing everyone here. I haven't seen people in forever, so it's so weird when your personal and your professional collide in one space. And I'm sitting here looking out at family and colleagues and friends. And Mom, it's so special for me to have you here. I really stand here on the shoulders of women like you. You've been a mom to all of us. You've guided and nurtured all of us. The role you've played for women on this continent. And then just for me personally on my journey, I realized we've never been on a stage together. We've only been in your office having deep, authentic conversations. And I was like, I don't even know, like, made me feel a bit anxious, but it also made me feel I've been amazingly privileged in this role to be able to spend time with you, to be able to get to know you, the work that you're doing, and all of you here today. I think that's one of the great privileges of this role in philanthropy. I think the people you meet, and to be working every day for social justice, to be working every day for the issues that one cares about, I think it's rare that you get to marry your passion for an issue with your work. And I think you do that really well. And you keep doing that. I looked at you when you got out of the lift and I was like, you're getting younger every time I see you. Like, what?
Nicolette, today it's about you. It's not about me.
But actually, I think the problem with philanthropy and this notion of legacy and individuals, it shouldn't be about me. Because every success I've had is of what everyone in this room has done. It's about all the organizations here do the hard work. I don't do the hard work. Giving money, it's not hard work. And I think we should stop equating the giving of money with social change. All of you out here do the work around social justice. And so I do think we need to grapple with how we conceptualize philanthropy, because we've lost its true meaning. Philanthropy, ancient Greek times, the word is about the love of humanity. There's nothing in there about money or wealth. It's about selflessness, giving, the notion of Ubuntu, I am because you are, the interconnectedness of people, where you don't want someone to go hungry. I feel like in the African context, our sense of giving community to community, we shouldn't lose sight of that, where we start seeing Europe and the US as the givers and we are only the receivers. I think we have to start redefining what real partnership looks like in philanthropy. And I think that's one of the lessons I've learned in this job. This job can often make you feel like you are very important in the equation, when actually you're not that important in the equation. We have to decenter philanthropy and we have to center justice, and not center ourselves. We have to say, and I say this to civil society organizations, to all of us, we have to center the people that matter, and we have to center justice and not center philanthropy or ourselves and our egos.
But I think that's precisely the contribution, the unique contribution, which I would like us to register in the way you were representing an institution which was not African, which what you are saying in terms of it's not about money, but the concept before it was really to give money to Africans. And somehow it came to become also helping to establish institutions, but it was about giving money. What I want us to take as a note, that what you are saying, it's precisely your contribution in that relationship of those who were giving money to Africans, and you transformed the way you related to grassroots organizations, to national civil society organizations, to African national organizations. You were able to establish a relationship in which precisely we came together and we felt we were creating something together, and that's why you say we center justice. So it is a transformation which did not happen by itself. In my view, it is the contribution you made when you came to this institution and relating to each one of those who were expected to be receiving, to make them create with you a vision in which we could meet in the middle, and then to say, but it's not about you and I, it's about those we serve. So who do we center our work and for what? And then this notion of a social justice to be really the core of the outcome. So I don't think you should minimize your contribution on that. And I'll ask us to think about what is the other American foundation which succeeded to do this? You hear me? And it's precisely for us to, not only to acknowledge, but to really to appreciate how one individual, when given an opportunity like the one you had, you were given an opportunity to serve, you transform not only relationships amongst players, but you also redirected the way we have to define our common agenda. Am I making, you see what I'm trying to say to you? And when I say it is about you, it is no. It's because you don't want, it's about you in the sense that it's how you transformed relationships amongst those you worked with. You were representing an institution and you make them feel they have a stake in that institution to the point they could redefine with you the agenda and center social justice into it. That's what I'm trying to, when I say it's about you. And when I say we celebrate you, it's also because we would like to hear from you. How did you, climb this, this mountain of transforming? What did it mean to you as a person and also as a social actor? Can you share with us what really you feel has been your own, transformation, where you became also a transformer? Okay?
Whew, hard one. I think I've made so many mistakes. When I hear you talking, I'm like, Mom, all the mistakes I made over the 16 years. When I joined Ford Foundation, I had no idea what I was going to be doing. Like, literally, I was a lawyer. I knew how to do heads of argument and go argue in court. And I joined Ford. I was burnt out from working in the gender-based violence sector. And I thought I'll take a short break. And Alice Brown said, join the Ford Foundation. I had no idea I knew there were these donors that funded me. And I think I came from a position where I was a grantee. Every organization I worked in before, we received funding. And the last organization I worked in, Interrights, was a Ford grantee as well, ended up closing down. And so coming from that perspective, I was like, oh, there's these people that come twice a year and you have to do show and tell and you have to tell a story about impact and then you go off and do the real work. And so I started out, and I think it's quite a heady journey when you join philanthropy from civil society. There's a lot of perks, there's a lot of benefits, and there's a lot of power. Mm-hmm. And you don't always realize what to do with that power because, there's power, there's privilege, and I think grappling with that and really understanding how this is a very political role and how do I use this role to further the things that I care about. We all hate feeling patronized. We all hate feeling like we don't know what we're talking about. And so I was trying to do that, but I also wasn't quite sure, how one does that. And so I think the first few years I shudder to think about mistakes I made, things I did wrong. And I realized that you can't shift a whole institution. You can't shift who the Ford Foundation is. But you can make incremental change, and you can learn and listen to other people. And there's a lot of people within the space in philanthropy that took me under their wing, the human rights people within the Ford Foundation, that taught me a lot and told me this is how you need to navigate this space, but also navigating and staying in touch with civil society and understanding really from a deep place what the frustrations were in civil society. Having lived that and having been there. But I still think that I haven't done enough. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I think we need to redefine what relationships look like between funders and civil society, what accountability looks like. We have to, I think the white savior mentality when it comes to Africa still exists. It's not as blatant as it used to be in the 80s, but I think the development sector, and we often look at the development sector and say, it's the EU, it's the bilaterals, it's the USAIDs that are getting it wrong, and we let ourselves off the hook in the social justice space. And I think we really need to grapple with how that still plays out. It may not play out in the pictures and the images we see of the hungry, starving African child, but it does play out in how we think about our theories of change and our impact and our monitoring and evaluation and how we decide who's in and who's out. And so I think that there's a lot of hard work that has to be done, but it can't be done only within philanthropy. The push has to come also from civil society to redefine what does accountability look like. And I think it has to come from within philanthropy. So when you say I've done a lot, and you make it sound like I've solved the problems, I think there's still problems in the relationship in the space. But I think we're at a place now where we're talking about it. And I mean, our president, Darren Walker, has written a book about this. He's quite open about what philanthropy has to grapple with. And so I think that's given me a space in Ford Foundation to also have this conversation about power and justice and what does it mean to center the communities that we care about. But we talk a lot. Like Mam Vu said, we talk a lot and we see little change happening. And I think civil society and social movements are at the core here, because the way civil society has pushed to redefine not just state accountability, but corporate accountability. We've created a whole frame of thinking about business and human rights. We need to be doing that with philanthropy as well, pushing on what is that accountability, because we're not a very democratic or transparent space at the moment in the way we relate to grantees.
You say I'm speaking as if we have solved problems. I didn't mean that. That don't mean that. I mean to acknowledge that we are in a different space from what used to be in that space where we are working together. And this positive approach which we have, where both sides can now acknowledge what has to be done better. And that alone is an achievement. And it's an achievement which didn't happen by itself. There are people who contributed for that. In one sense, what I'm trying to say is that you had your position as representing for Ford Foundation, but you also kept yourself an African girl, who could look at Ford, how do we transform the relationship and make sure that Africans, whether they are individuals who are working in philanthropy, whether they are institutions which they represent, and the causes they are fighting to take them forward, how this can be seen in a space where more than just those who give and receive, we meet one another in the middle. That's all I want to say. Now, you are too modest to say We didn't, yeah, you are too modest to say we didn't achieve much, we didn't, etc. But tell me a little bit about your experience in terms of how do you relate to power? And power here, I'm not talking only, I'm not asking only, public institutions. Including, the power which the Ford is a big house, believes that it has that power in imposing sometimes an agenda here. How did you deal with that?
With difficulty. I think it's a constant journey that we have to keep learning and checking ourselves in terms of power. Because I think I went through a period coming from a feminist space where I was first trying to deny that I had power. But my sisters on the continent told me, you have power.
Exactly.
Use it in a way that can benefit us. Don't walk around saying you don't have power. You have power. But are you going to be an authoritarian with that power, or are you going to try to democratize the space? Because I think for my first few years in philanthropy, I was still trying to be an activist in activist mode. I wasn't in philanthropy mode. I was very confused about my identity. And I think that's very problematic when you come into a philanthropy space. It's confusing for civil society also when you're not sure who you are. I think being in solidarity with, but I stopped being on the front line when I joined Ford. And so understanding that, and understanding what can you do as a program officer versus what could I do as the regional director in the office, and what could I do as a global director. And I think, how did I take some of that power that was bestowed on me and say, well, how do I get more resources to African feminist movements? How do I make sure that we deal with the fact that we struggle with general support? I think the Office for Southern Africa, I'm always so proud when I see now it's almost at 90% unrestricted core funding. When I started out in Ford, and that's not just me, it's everyone in Ford.
Hey, did you hear?
It's not just me.
No, but no. I didn't say you did it alone. I didn't say that. But I think it's important for us not to let some big issues pass without taking note. What she said is, at this point, 90%, say it again, so that I don't really misinterpret you.
90% of the funding that goes out is unrestricted core funding.
You hear me?
And
I started this letters register, the fact that when you are in a certain position, you transform relationships, right? And now, another big issue she's saying, I think before that, I should underline that we heard her. Instead of saying what she achieved, she started saying mistakes she has made. Did you realize? That's what it means, humility, but then she also acknowledged that my sisters in philanthropy area, they taught me, isn't it what she said? They taught her to exercise the power she had in a way she shouldn't be shy to use that power. And I think it's important. So that's her experience, and this is what she is telling us as her journey. But now she says, at this point, 90% of the funds which are there are unrestricted. And again, I'll ask you, how many foundations are at this stage? And when you get to that stage, it is simply the only thing you have to do is to acknowledge the role of those who have got power and they know how to use power to, and it's her words again, to democratize, what did you say? Democratize what?
I don't know what I said.
But I heard you, and I just want us all to take those things with us. She used the power she had with humility. At the beginning, even being a bit confused whether she was, the activist, or she was at the side where she held this power. But she used in a way to democratize, at the end, to understand that civil society organizations on this continent, and in fact globally, they need unrestricted funds so that they can manage according their priorities within an agenda which has been agreed, surely, but at the same time to respect, and this is my word now, but to respect the priorities which can be defined by the organizations themselves, which means the power which you, at the beginning, you were confused, you didn't want to take it, you learned how to exercise it, to democratize that power, and even to give it back to organizations which at the beginning were simply receiving. They still receive, but in a space of respect in which you respected their priorities. You hear me? And this is what we are learning from her. And I said this, her journey. But yes, okay, go ahead.
There's a but. Because I think also where I haven't been good, when you're part of a big institution, we're a matrix institution, 10 offices around the world, headquarters. You have power to shape a little bit your space as a program officer or in an office. And I've had an amazing boss who gives me lots of free rein as he's sitting here. But I think there's the broader decisions that get made at board level where you really don't have a say. And I think giving the unrestricted funding was a lot came from our leadership as well, saying this is something we need to do. But at the same time, we narrowed our work a lot. So we closed down a lot of programs. We stopped having a media arts and culture program in our office. You struggle to understand why we were working on women's rights, but now we're only working on gender-based violence. Like, what about all the other issues? So I feel like we haven't always, even though we say it's about you defining your priorities, sometimes you have to maneuver yourself into a pretzel and redefine. And I've seen you sit in meetings with foundations where you're trying to understand, like, we're saying we put you in the center, Mama Shal. You are in the center. But tell me about your work on gender-based violence. Don't tell me about the other stuff around economic justice. And so I feel like there's a tension there, which is something that I've probably not done enough on in my time. And I think that's a hard one to move. The core support is the first step to get there. But I think moving to a space where we're saying we trust you, and we trust you to define your priorities for this region, and that we know the way you see these issues connected, we're going to trust you and invest in that. And it's not about our strategies. Because philanthropy, we spend a lot of time and money on strategy development.
I know.
And there's a tension between us saying we want to develop strategy versus we think those closest to the pain and those closest to the problems have the solutions. Because if they have the solutions, it makes your strategy a bit obsolete. And I think I've struggled with that because I've gotten very involved in strategy because I've enjoyed thinking about strategy. And it's a nice role for me because otherwise, what's my role? Like, and so I feel like, but if you're really unpacking the power, and if you're wanting to cede power and shift power to people on the front lines, then it does mean that you're not going to be focused so much on your institution and your foundation and your strategies.
Yeah. I think you are giving us a homework here, all of us. Because Nicolette put it right. I mean, I was one of those who struggled to understand why instead of, dealing with women's rights broadly, which would give, much bigger space for civil society organizations to choose in which angle they would want to work on women's rights, then we come to this gender-based violence. And one of the things before that I want to to share with you as well. I mean, the Ford Foundation came here and they were very, 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 focused and very determined that we should, and I remember having a very tough discussion with Darren about this. When on HIV, it was the time of HIV, when HIV was really the biggest issue for us, particularly in Southern Africa. And then because in other parts of the world, the groups which were grappling much more with the HIV were, for instance, women, who are with women and men with having sex with men. It was that group in other parts of the world. And it was not our reality here. And I remember debating with him. I said, but I'm really worried here because for me, it's adolescents, it's young women. This is the biggest group which is being affected here. And now you say my agenda should be narrowed only to LGBT. Is it that what we want? So you are right. There's always tension in what happens in other parts of the world and what are our big issues here. Well, yes, we don't mean that we shouldn't give, particularly because there's a lot of homophobia around it. We shouldn't be dealing with the LGBT. We should. But it is still known in our reality that girls, young women, and adult women, including married women, are still the biggest group which is affected by HIV, at least in Southern Africa. That's the reality. So there are these tensions. You are absolutely right. But
But you had the power to have a debate with the chair of our board, Kofi Uppending and Darren Walker, and I could sit back and let Mama Shal just deal with it.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that power to meet with the president of Ford and say,
That is
I don't
true.
think you're doing this right.
That is true. I wouldn't be modest to say I don't have that space and I don't have this opportunity to have this kind of conversation at the top level. But what I'm trying to say, and I want us to acknowledge from you, is within the decisions which are made by the board, you were able during your time now to, how do you design things in a way you just don't implement blindly what is defined by the board, but you kind of transform it into the reality which you are trying to transform, and giving even some space, narrow as it might be, some space for organizations to have a say, at least in the way they can use the resources which they get from there. And I think this is important because we are talking here in issues of power, but again, what you are saying in other words is that, yeah, there might be a bigger power than yours, but you also have power at your level, and you have to use it well. And
Yeah.
you have, and what we are saying is that you use it well. Challenging but challenging also civil society organizations to which you are supposed, to be facilitates the work. So this issue of the power we have, sometimes I will leave it for another opportunity. We as NGOs, right? Because we also have these resources and we have the ability to go to grassroots organizations, to communities, etc. We also exercise power in our own way. You have to be able to use that power in a way you respect basically their identity, their priorities, and even their pace. Yes, you will want them to be accountable to report, but you need to understand that the pace in which they're going to be working, it's not always going to be what you expect, but you help them then to catch up with the pace. And these are things which, for all of us, it's important to take into account in our work on this, which I say, of sharing, of philanthropy, if you want to. I don't know, our time is over,
Yeah.
right? You are standing there to tell us that, but I'm asking you, have you had enough? Have you had enough of her?
There's no way they could have had
There's
enough.
no way. Well, because I was supposed to, to get.
You've done a wonderful job, Mom.
No, I was supposed to really to provoke you, to tell us more and more about your experience. But I think we had enough. I mean, in some insights you brought in this conversation. Now, Nicolette, before we go, I want to really to underline one thing. You started being just activist at a certain level, which you can call of grassroots, and then you became an organization. You became a program director. Then you became an African whatever, and you ended up being global. From here, but you were running a global program. And you didn't give me time to discuss this. So I think, no, because this is not, I want to end up here. This is not supposed as, I'm sorry to say this, but this is not a farewell. You hear me? This is not a farewell. This is let's stop here. Let's celebrate. Let's really be so deeply thankful for this extraordinary gift of a human being she is, but an extraordinary leader she has been. But she is amongst us. She's not going anywhere, is she? So we say farewell to where to? Where is she going? Huh? So my point is, there's no farewell here, darling.
I'm not.
No. There's no farewell, and I'm really with. I'm sorry, Vui. But there's no farewell with Nicolette. We will have, I think, after you have rested, after you have decided which direction you want to give it to your life, these kind of discussions we'll continue to have. We need to. We really need to. So because, in 1.5 hours, we couldn't, learn from 16 years of your life and career. But I just want once again to say thank you for the gift you are to all of us. And also to tell you we are extremely proud that it's a child of this soul. As you were saying, you started in a point where you didn't even know how to do things, but then you learned, but you grew and you became now a global leader. And we really take pride of this. And I want also to tell you that, as Madiba would say, you climb a mountain, when you get to the top, you realize there are many other, mountains you have to climb. We still have lots of mountains to climb with you and to climb with your leadership. So take your time, relax, make the choices you want to. But for me, with the permission of everyone, we still need to drink from the well of knowledge, of expertise, of leadership style, which she represents, so that we will also take this dynamics of what we have been doing to a different level. And I have some ideas. And I'll come to you and to Becky and to others, to you too. I'll come with some ideas of where do we take it from now? Okay? Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I didn't do the job you expected me to do, but thank you very much. Yeah.
We're not done with you.
Oh, we have to stay on the stage.
You
They're
stay
not
here.
done. We both
No. Oh.
Thank you, everybody. I
Yeah,
want to
totally
invite Pumi, Halima, and Ashley to join us on the stage. They're going to share very briefly some thoughts with you and some I was told not to call them responses, rather to call them provocations. And so they'll be coming up on stage. I'm going to introduce them as they come. Halima Mohammed is at Trust Africa. She's an African philanthropy specialist. Pumi Tetwa is a very beloved, long-standing activist with many years of experience. And Ashley Green Thompson, where is Ashley? Ashley will join us when he's here. But in the meantime, I want to invite some provocations from our speakers. We're going to give them a microphone each. I've been told to ask you to hold it very close to your mouth so that everyone can hear you on the streaming version. And over to you, Halima. Here we go.
I would hug you. Just giving you a hug. Go for it, just go for it.
We needed to set up us on today. Thank you very much. I asked Duga not to say responses because we wouldn't deem to begin to respond to this conversation. But we do want to throw out a few provocations. And so without any further ado, Pumi, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Halima. Muito obrigada, Mama. Muito obrigada. Nikki, thank you for being a feminist. Thank you for being a feminist, because I think in what Mom says about giving gratitude, it's those early formation, and when you speak about marrying your passion, I could see that in what you stood for, and in many ways, the humility of pushing back and saying, I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone. It's part of, you know, deep feminist principles that you have embraced, and feminist principles, particularly on the African continent, that sometimes it's not easy, you know, to embrace people like me, queer, Black, African, and so on. And so that's where I want to start. You know, you two were just so beautiful. It wasn't easy to actually think about how we will provoke you in this part. You were just so beautiful, but I do want to invite some reflections, because as you are not living, and one of the things that was absent is actually sharing with us some of the difficulties of engaging, whether in what has become like the term of decolonizing philanthropy, what it means to center One of the things you said, and you've written about, this notion of ceding power. I've been disturbed about this. Cede the power to grassroots. We're going to cede the power to movements, to civil society. I think we have to interrogate that. And especially because the suitcase holds a particular power, but collective power that is rooted in movements and so on. So even as we say, you know, philanthropy must cede power, giving that power to even cede power, I think it's a collective challenge we must engage with. It was also, you know, interesting. I know 2 weeks ago you were engaged with our brother who was challenging on the democratization issue as a notion, you know, of particularly the West, cut and paste. We want to democratize also in Africa. And I mean, I raised this issue as you and Mom were also talking about democratizing philanthropy. It's almost the same. What does that mean, you know, in some ways? And I think it relates partly to how you express not a lot about how difficult it is to even navigate, you know, your own positionality in relation to how, you know, with solidarity, you know, moving from being an activist lawyer to now being, you know, holding that power. What does it mean? It's not an easy, it's not, beyond just this announcements of solidarity, sharing, as opposed, it becomes words, right? That we love and they sound good, but there's no praxis that we are attaching to exactly those things. So I know we have a lot to still discuss, but those are some of the things that I wanted to lift. And I celebrate that you've been able to make some significant moves within, not just within Fort, but also in spaces that we've shared in relation to feminist sisters rethinking, you know, how to move. But we can't keep talking, like you say. Yeah. We need to get somewhere. Mm-hmm. So those are my initial thoughts. And again, thank you so much for what you keep doing. Halima, thank you.
Ashley?
Is this my opening remarks? Right? To speak. My brief was to talk about to put some pointers about a different practice and the ideological basis that underpins the work of my organization called ACT Ubumbano. The word Ubumbano is Nguni for solidarity, so that kind of tells you what the ideological underpinning is. So this, I've drawn from a document that we published recently called Origins, Identity and Practice. And that's a very, very cheap plug to go to our website and download it. To try and get a sense of what solidarity means in the context of struggle and inequality, right? And with this framing, I'll try and capture the insights that come from our practice as an organization that's only 3 years old, but is trying to talk to some of the things that you've mentioned in your conversation earlier. I'll start off by saying that referring to the Kopanong principles, which a set of principles adopted by the leaders of European organizations who were part of our formation. And these principles in 2017 were based on the firm belief that solidarity and unequal relations of power remain incompatible. So here they're talking about solidarity being about dismantling the mechanics of power, and secondly, by producing new relations that are built on more equitable terms. Emphasis is placed on a practice that departs from transactional funding, departs from one-way accountability and top-down decision-making, and globally driven priority focus areas, and other development traditions that foster global and local inequality. And local organizations, Southern African organizations. And in this, solidarity is seen first and foremost as a practice-based phenomenon. It emerges and evolves through an exploratory process of making the directly affected communities. And it's their different realities, struggle realities, along with the experience of the NGOs that accompany them, that offer constant lessons about what constitutes real-world solidarity. This journey, though, is not without its challenges, and I think Nicolette had mentioned the issue of relationships. So I'm going to zone in on that because in my very layman's understanding of solidarity, it demands that there's more than one partner involved, right? You can't be in solidarity with yourself. So our relationship with our founding donor partners has been fractious, to say the least. And I'm talking about the difficulties that we've encountered rather than the positives in this instance, because that might give us insights into how we can address some of the power questions that are on the table today. We struggle to shape your participation as a northern donor in the structures and processes of which is there to enable them to engage with local voices in a meaningful way that challenges them to reflect on their own agency where they operate. And this agency is about how they challenge their own local contexts. How are they pushing back against the rising right wing in Europe? How are they working for genuine social justice in northern communities? And how are they challenging economistic definitions of what constitutes human development? This agency is also moving away from an extractivist model of fundraising that relies on caricaturing African suffering and poverty. Basically, if they could ban the log frame, I'd be a very happy director of an organization. It's not likely to happen, though. Because this is difficult to do. These changes that we challenge our northern partners to do is difficult when the people with the power and authority in those institutions are not here for the regular engagement. Our first convening was in 2017. We had the heads of all our northern donor organizations present. And it's they who adopted the Kopanong principles. That was in 2017. There haven't been at another convening that we've had since then, right? And we as southern-based organizations usually deal with desk officers who are usually our most ferocious defenders and advocates. But they don't have the capacity to change the institutions in their hierarchy. And it's a problem. Relationships are also at Active Bumbano with a diverse range of community-based initiatives in Southern Africa, where we deliberately challenge our thinking and practice when we provide small funding for social justice actions. As a team, and we're a very small team, my colleague Zanele is in the crowd. She's actually the one who tells me what to do most of the time. We suspend our prejudices about what constitutes a good funding application. Instead, we have conversations with partners to understand the energy and local agency that led them to write the application in the first place. People don't just wake up in the morning and write an application unless there's a sense of agency that is present to drive them to do that. Who are we to say whether that is the proposal? We have seen how activists in local organizations diminish the value of their work because they believe that the funder might be interested in something else. We have a partner in Bulawayo who has been successfully supporting their community through various livelihoods initiatives involving livestock. In the last round, they submitted a proposal for drug rehabilitation. They've never done it before, but they thought that might be a more attractive thing for us. So these are the problems we need to deal with. My last point is that relationships start and grow when there's a conversation in which both parties have interest and value. So both parties talk. We convene learning hubs and solidarity hubs, and these are spaces where activists, NGOs, faith-based institutions, and sometimes our northern partners, where they can talk about their social practice in a critical way. It's a space deliberately with no predetermined agenda. The agenda gets set by the participants themselves. And it's one that invites deep and honest reflection on what worked more importantly, what didn't in creating change. Partners are encouraged not to try and impress, but rather to speak honestly about their failures so that we can learn from those things. It's a deep listening exercise that uses multiple media for telling stories. And it has helped us at Active Bumbano to become more responsive in our own work to the demands of being genuinely in solidarity with struggling communities. You said a lot of the things that we do. And I think our relationship with Ford only started a couple of years ago. Long may it continue, Vuiswa. I'm just putting that out there. But it's amazing to be in a space where we don't talk about log frames here. We talk about how do we listen in a meaningful way to the lived experience of those who are at the receiving end of the injustices of this world. And so those are my opening provocative remarks. I hope they were provocative. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Ashley, and thanks for me. I was saying to Wiswa earlier, how did I get here? So somehow I've been asked to provide some provocations, which I'm going to try to do. Wole Soyinka once said, I cannot accept the definition of collective good as articulated by a privileged minority in society, especially when that minority is in power. And while the context is different, I want us to pause for a moment to think about institutionalized philanthropy as the privileged minority in the sentence, and to think about what power is held within that system. And I focus here on system, not on individuals. There are individuals within the system who are trying to make it work. And not all philanthropy is equal, right? The Graça Machel Foundation has a different level of power to the Ford Foundation. And the Community Foundation of the Western Cape may have a different level of power to both of those two. So I think we have to have nuance and think about how we have these conversations, not as generalized conversations, but to recognize that power comes from where you are positioned in the system, even within philanthropy. And so it's a system, more for the most, that irrespective of individual intention, is positioned above as a privileged minority rather than together with or in solidarity with those who are on the front lines of social change and those who are bearing the brunt of injustice. And this privilege and positionality brings a system of power influence that we must interrogate, not just on processes and mechanisms. Again, I say not just on processes and mechanisms, but in the very conceptualization of what is a just society, how we get there, and what our role in that is. So the system has power to define the narrative of the collective good. It's fantastic that we're giving 90% general support, unrestricted grants. But who are we giving those grants to? Who's deciding whose voices are in? Who's deciding whose voices are out? It's the power to define which issues within the narrative. Is it women's rights? Is it gender-based violence? Is it climate? You know, we shift. We constantly, as philanthropy, shift. And we expect the sector to shift, right? So we have, actually, this proposal you were talking about coming up when that's not their area of work, but also that's not the lens that they use in which to understand their work. There's a power in this space to define the strategies that would be best placed to achieve the kinds of impact we value. So our theories of change tell us what impact should be. And then we assess proposals, and we assess dialogues, and we assess interventions based on what we think the world should look like, not on what the people who are doing the work say the world should look like. It's the power to define which civic formations are appropriate mechanisms for funding and which are not. And we tend to focus on professionalized civic mechanisms when we know that the spaces of change are coming from much beyond that. We define what civic resistance is acceptable and what is not. And I think there's a big conversation to be had there. And we define whose voices are heard and afforded space. All of us in this room have power by the very fact that we're in this room. But the fact that I'm sitting here on this table means that I have a power relative to those who are on the ground experiencing injustice every day. And we have to interrogate that. Not all philanthropy is equal. The power dynamics within the system have to be taken care of. But And while philanthropy is not absolute, and there are critiques from inside and outside, and yes, we have seen changes. We've definitely seen changes. But I think the overall response of our philanthropy has been to tweak the margins of practice while leaving the fundamental fault lines untouched. And we pat ourselves on how progressive our changes are. And I think we have some deep introspection to do. So it's easier to extend the term of the grant than to question whether our programmatic strategies are in touch with the lived realities of people we aim to serve. It's easier to give more flexibility in the use of funding than to create a system where those living in justice aren't just consulted, but they have an actual say in what we're doing. It's easier to cover operational costs of institutions we know than to ask whose voices and perspectives are excluded. It's easier to use 5% in a participatory grant-making initiative than ask ourselves, what does it mean to change how we use the other 95%? So I think, these kind of tweaks, they allow our privilege to remain untouched. They are incremental changes that reflect that while strategies and tactics are open for change, the system isn't. It's taken the path of least resistance rather than thinking through what does a fundamental redesign requires. And it can be done. People like Ashley and others are starting to do this work. And we talk about it as experiments, but actually it's not experimentation, it's doing. We have to commit. We have to stop saying, we'll put in this 1% for this experiment and that 1% on pool funds. We have to commit as institutions, as philanthropic institutions. But it requires, Nicolette, we do much more than make ourselves uncomfortable, because we can live with discomfort very, very easily. It requires a fundamental transition on the way in which we view the role of philanthropy, and that's an ideological transition, not a practical one. And so what does this ideological transition require? Center the agency of those living the injustice as the core of our work. That's it. That's the tweet. It's about their agency, not ours. What does it mean for institutionalized philanthropy? It means that power is actually not the start of the analysis. It's our positionality and how we use our power and privilege, which is what Mama Michelle and Nicolette were talking about earlier. I think agency as a lens demands we fundamentally rethink our role in advancing a just society and ask, how do we use that privilege to enable the space for agency, but also to remove the barriers? And we are part of instilling some of those barriers. So we have to think about what's our complicity in that. It demands we let go of the themes and boxes and learn by unlearning the parameters and divides that give our work meaning, but actually they don't in fact correlate with lived reality or the intersectionality of lived injustice. I think it demands instrumentalization in our practice has to be recognized. We support others when they do work that we think is relevant. We think it's relevant. And only then do we invite them into conversations, do we invite them to submit their proposals, do we invite them into site visits. It's only when we think it's relevant. Agency as elements demands that we are committed to supporting the diversity of spaces addressing injustice, not just those who are professionalized and formalized and have legalized constitutions. It demands a commitment to long-term change that doesn't end when the grant ends, because our relationships have tended to be transactional. We are in solidarity with you only so long as we are giving you money. And once we move along to the next best thing or the next program strategy, we've completely forgotten about the work that you're doing. This is the reality of how it works in much of our philanthropic spaces. Agency as a lens demands we fundamentally reconfigure our role. We have to decenter our institutions, our impact, our legacies. And I want to challenge again, it's no longer about inviting others to the seats at our table or about setting up new tables, but space for entirely new structures to be built, structures that shape the narratives and agendas on what's a just society, even if those structures exclude us. And then we have to figure out, well, how do we ally to that? What's our role? Does it mean that the Ford Foundation is going to be in Matuba? Justin and I were talking about this earlier. No. But if it's not, then what does Ford need to do differently to enable it to allow space for agency for people in Matubatuba. The philanthropic system is inherently inequitable, but how we choose to position our privilege need not be so. Thank you.
Mama has to go.
Dugan, how are we on time?
Mom has to go. Mom has to go.
Can we give space for Mama Michelle before she needs to go for any final comments?
No, I'm not going to give a final comment because I would suggest that you are not going to invite me when you have the follow-up debates. If you say it's a final, you are really kicking me out. And when you have to follow, not today, of course, but when you have to follow up with these debates, I want to be sitting there, not here, and listen. Because just listen to the three of you, I think we could start another session here, don't you think so? Absolutely. Which has perhaps very little with what we have said, but it's on its own, it's another session, right? But I wanted, before I leave, I wanted to make a general comment, which is, when I said we as Africans, we share, and for us philanthropy is sharing. I want to leave you with this to think about. It's not a final comment. You see, we have to come to a point where we recognize that every single community we work with, and we try, and I'm saying try, okay? We try to meet in the middle and uplift what they are doing, how they are doing, what their aspirations are, and how they want really to get to a different level of their own development, okay? It's not what we can offer. We don't offer anything. In other terms, we facilitate, a very small part of resources. And that small part of resources, it's money we put into them. But the biggest thing, it comes from them. And we have to recognize this. It comes from those communities. So philanthropy for us, it's not what you touch, okay? It's not what you touch as tangible and material. It's the knowledge. It's the experience. It's the way of organizing. Every community has its own internal organization, and that's how these communities have been and we say they are resilient, okay? We say they are resilient for all these centuries. There's an immense, immense knowledge which is inside there. And this is what they bring up. And we just facilitate a small portion of that sharing I'm talking about. It's just to put a little bit of money, and in this money, which helps them to move for perhaps the informality of how they have been doing things, and it to become a little bit more formal. But we have to recognize in that formalization, there's a lot which is being lost. And many times we don't register what with the formalization, which force them to put an application, and to put the application in the language, okay? In the language which will make the application acceptable then for them to get that small amount of money. You hear me? We have a big problem. And I come to you, darling. You put it right when you said, we didn't discuss here democratization. I think it's your words. You said democratization of philanthropy. This democratization has to come from the communities to us, to transform us, to teach us how we can continue to facilitate that small amount of resources, but giving, a space to ourselves to learn to listen, to learn to understand, to learn then to come to what Nicolette put very clearly at the beginning. You come to a point where then you meet. And when you meet here in the middle, you center. I think these were your words. You center. And who do you center? Okay? Who do you center? And how do you center? And how then transformation and development happens? So we really have to be humble enough to know we are very, very far from learning about what philanthropy in African terms it means. That knowledge, that experience, that philosophy of life, even if you like, it's a philosophy of life to understand that, to respect that, and to be humble enough to say, the small amount of money you put into the hands, it's really very small. But what is more important is how they take their own experience and they elevate it to a space where they center and we center together. If I was speaking in Portuguese, I think I would express myself very clearly. So I'm struggling with language here. But I just want to leave and say, we need to have these kind of conversations. We really have to have, because I worry very much if we see ourselves as those who have to continue, then we are here, so we moved, she helped us to move from the Ford, the American Ford, which is here, which is helping, civil society organizations on the continent to find their own space. But the civil society organizations themselves, they have a long journey to know what is going to make you relevant is when you are able to bring exactly the communities you serve. I said serve. The communities you serve, for them to uplift with their agenda, with their philosophy of life, with their ability to dream and to transform dreams into realities. And then you will know you are too small and you are just a very small part of what has to transform our societies. And then to phrase clearly what we mean by social justice in those terms. What do we mean? It's not the social justice which has been written somewhere else and we use it. We still have to define our own understanding of social justice in Africa and in different communities, because this African continent of ours, it's a huge variety. Only in South Africa, I don't know what kind of social justices we have to build for us to become a nation. Am I making clear? Yes. So I welcome these discussions. And I said, I'm sitting there and you'll be talking. And I don't know what it's with those colleagues in crime. That's what she said. Those who are colleagues in crime, let Nicolette have a break. Just have a break. But she's going nowhere, and she's going to continue to have these debates with us. Thank you so much, and I have to go. Thank you very, very much.
I give you a hug.
Thank you very much, Mama Michelle, for your time and for your contribution.
Yeah. So, I don't know, I gave you a hug, yeah, you know? I gave you a hug. Now I don't know what I'm going to do there. Oh, my goodness. I left it. I did give you a hug. You don't want it anymore. But you gave me, a homework with democratizing philanthropy. I'll continue to think. Exactly, and I will continue to work myself in this. And when I come and picture,
Oh, there's a break. We're going to have a break. For the next one. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Forward. You know,
We're going
these
to
people
have-
are very
We're going to
They
have a
give you
15-minute
instructions.
break after this, and we will continue this conversation at 4:05. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Is that it? Yeah. Okay then. Thank you very much. So we'll continue at 4:05. We're going to take. Oh, you want to? Yes, we are taking a break. Yes.
It has been a blast. You've been an amazing boss, a friend, and a mentor. I've really had a great time with you. You always made sure that everybody was seen and everybody was heard. Keep being you. Love you lots and lots.
It's been a great pleasure working under your leadership. Thank you for being a mentor and a support system when I was going through hell. I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss you, but I will.
It has been a great privilege to learn from you, to be inspired by you, to grow under your leadership. I just wanted to wish you all the best. Your legacy is broad, it's deep, and it will last a long time.
I'm very sad that you are leaving. I came to Ford to work with you, and now you're on your way out. But thank you so much for your guidance, for your feminist leadership. But I wish you only the best in your future endeavors.
Hey Nicolette, I actually can't believe that I am recording this video. I just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for your leadership, and I cannot wait to see what the future looks like for you. Thank you for redefining what it means to be a leader for me.
Boss, hello boss. You will always be my boss, as I've always said. And I want to say good luck to you in your new endeavors. Blessings and love. Peace.
Hi Nicolette, we've literally known each other for the shortest time, but all the memories that we've shared together will stay in my heart for a very long time. Thank you so much for all that you have done in the sector. Thank you for doing it for Black women, and thank you for the expert power. We can't wait to see you on big stages, and all the best.
It was an honor working with you. All the best for the future, and thank you for your leadership.
One thing I can appreciate is how Nicolette brought me in as part of the Ford family, even though I was just a service provider. She's been a great inspiration, and all I want to say is good luck to your future and everything you do. Tell Cullen that I miss him and you must call me.
In Xhosa, we've got a saying, "Amakhe babonana, bobuya babonane." So I'm gonna see you around, just to say I wish you happiness, success, and lots of relaxation after Ford.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you, but I am with you in spirit as we celebrate a remarkable, extraordinary, brilliant, indefatigable woman I admire, adore, and love. Nicolette has been someone I have turned to time and time again for counsel, wisdom, and fellowship. I can't wait to hear about what comes next for you. Thank you, dear Nicolette, and sending love from East 43rd Street in Manhattan.
Nicolette, I am so lucky to have worked closely with you since 2013 when I first began at the Ford Foundation. I've seen you do amazing work, and I've watched you gain increasing confidence as a leader across multiple roles in those years, from SPO to RD to Director of GRAJI, and now to being really a global feminist. So I just want to tell you thank you, to let you know how much I love you and admire you. So thank you for your leadership and your friendship and all your contributions to Ford in the field.
It has been a blast. You've been an amazing boss, a friend, and a mentor. I've really had a great time with you. You always made sure that everybody was seen and everybody was heard. Keep being you. Love you lots and lots.
It's been a great pleasure working under your leadership. Thank you for being a mentor and a support system when I was going through hell. I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss you, but I will.
It has been a great privilege to learn from you, to be inspired by you, to grow under your leadership. I just wanted to wish you all the best. Your legacy is broad, it's deep, and it will last a long time.
I'm very sad that you are leaving. I came to Ford to work with you, and now you're on your way out. But thank you so much for your guidance, for your feminist leadership. But I wish you only the best in your future endeavors.
Hey Nicolette, I actually can't believe that I am recording this video. I just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for your leadership, and I cannot wait to see what the future looks like for you. Thank you for redefining what it means to be a leader for me.
Boss, hello boss. You will always be my boss, as I've always said. And I want to say good luck to you in your new endeavors. Blessings and love. Peace.
Hi Nicolette, we've literally known each other for the shortest time, but all the memories that we've shared together will stay in my heart for a very long time. Thank you so much for all that you have done in the sector. Thank you for doing it for Black women, and thank you for the expert power. We can't wait to see you on big stages, and all the best.
It was an honor working with you. All the best for the future, and thank you for your leadership.
One thing I can appreciate is how Nicolette brought me in as part of the Ford family, even though I was just a service provider. She's been a great inspiration, and all I want to say is good luck to your future and everything you do. Tell Cullen that I miss him, and you must call me.
In Xhosa, we've got a saying, "Amakhe babonana, bobuya babonane." So I'm gonna see you around, just to say I wish you happiness, success, and lots of relaxation after Ford.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you, but I am with you in spirit as we celebrate a remarkable, extraordinary, brilliant, indefatigable woman I admire, adore, and love. Nicolette has been someone I have turned to time and time again for counsel, wisdom, and fellowship. I can't wait to hear about what comes next for you. Thank you, dear Nicolette, and sending love from East 43rd Street in Manhattan.
Nicolette, I am so lucky to have worked closely with you since 2013 when I first began at the Ford Foundation. I've seen you do amazing work, and I've watched you gain increasing confidence as a leader across multiple roles in those years, from SPO to RD to Director of GRAJI, and now to being really a global feminist. So I just want to tell you thank you, to let you know how much I love you and admire you. So thank you for your leadership and your friendship and all your contributions to Ford in the field.
It has been a blast. You've been an amazing boss, a friend, and a mentor. I've really had a great time with you. You always made sure that everybody was seen and everybody was heard. Keep being you. Love you lots and lots.
Learn from you, to be inspired by you, to grow under your leadership. I just wanted to wish you all the best. Your legacy is broad, it's deep, and it will last a long time.
I'm very sad that you are leaving. I came to Ford to work with you, and now you're on your way out. But thank you so much for your guidance, for your feminist leadership. But I wish you only the best in your future endeavors.
Hey Nicolette, I actually can't believe that I am recording this video. I just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for your leadership, and I cannot wait to see what the future looks like for you. Thank you for redefining what it means to be a leader for me.
Boss, hello boss. You will always be my boss, as I've always said. And I want to say good luck to you in your new endeavors. Blessings and love. Peace.
Hi Nicolette, we've literally known each other for the shortest time, but all the memories that we've shared together will stay in my heart for a very long time. Thank you so much for all that you have done in the sector. Thank you for doing it for Black women, and thank you for the expert power. We can't wait to see you on big stages, and all the best.
It was an honor working with you. All the best for the future, and thank you for your leadership. One thing I can appreciate is how Nicolette brought me in as part of the Ford family, even though I was just a service provider. She's been a great inspiration, and all I want to say is good luck to your future and everything you do. Tell Cullen that I miss him and he must call me.
In Xhosa, we've got a saying, "Amakhe babonana, bobuya babonane." So I'm gonna see you around, just to say I wish you happiness, success, and lots of realization after Ford.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you, but I am with you in spirit as we celebrate a remarkable, extraordinary, brilliant, indefatigable woman I admire, adore, and love. Nicolette has been someone I have turned to time and time again for counsel, wisdom, and fellowship. I can't wait to hear about what comes next for you. Thank you, dear Nicolette, and sending love from East 43rd Street in Manhattan.
Nicolette, I am so lucky to have worked closely with you since 2013 when I first began at the Ford Foundation. I've seen you do amazing work, and I've watched you gain increasing confidence as a leader across multiple roles in those years, from SPO to RD to director of GRAJI, and now to being really a global feminist. So I just want to tell you thank you, to let you know how much I love you and admire you. So thank you for your leadership and your friendship and all your contributions to Ford in the field.
It has been a blast. You've been an amazing boss, a friend, and a mentor. I've really had a great time with you. You always made sure that everybody was seen and everybody was heard. Keep being you. Love you lots and lots.
It's been a great pleasure working under your leadership. Thank you for being a mentor and a support system when I was going through hell. I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss you, but I will.
It has been a great privilege to learn from you, to be inspired by you, to grow under your leadership. I just wanted to wish you all the best. Your legacy is broad, it's deep, and it will last a long time.
I'm very sad that you are leaving. I came to Ford to work with you, and now you're on your way out. But thank you so much for your guidance, for your feminist leadership. But I wish you only the best in your future endeavors.
Hey Nicolette, I actually can't believe that I am recording this video. I just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for your leadership, and I cannot wait to see what the future looks like for you. Thank you for redefining what it means to be a leader for me.
Boss, hello boss. You will always be my boss, as I've always said. And I want to say good luck to you in your new endeavors. Blessings and love. Peace.
Hi Nicolette, we've literally known each other for the shortest time, but all the memories that we've shared together will stay in my heart for a very long time. Thank you so much for all that you have done in the sector. Thank you for doing it for Black women, and thank you for the Expert Power. We can't wait to see you on big stages, and all the best.
It was an honor working with you. All the best for the future, and thank you for your leadership. One thing I can appreciate is how Nicolette brought me in as part of the Ford family, even though I was just a service provider. She's been a great inspiration, and all I want to say is good luck to your future and everything you do. Tell Cullen that I miss him and he must call me.
In Xhosa, we've got a saying, "Amakhe babonana, bobuya babonane." So I'm gonna see you around, just to say I wish you happiness, success, and lots of relaxation after Ford.
A remarkable, extraordinary, brilliant, indefatigable woman I admire, adore, and love. Nicolette has been someone I have turned to time and time again for counsel, wisdom, and fellowship. I can't wait to hear about what comes next for you. Thank you, dear Nicolette, and sending love from East 43rd Street in Manhattan.
Nicolette, I am so lucky to have worked closely with you since 2013 when I first began at the Ford Foundation. I've seen you do amazing work, and I've watched you gain increasing confidence as a leader across multiple roles in those years, from SPO to RD to director of GRAJI, and now to being really a global feminist. So I just want to tell you thank you, to let you know how much I love you and admire you. So thank you for your leadership and your friendship and all your contributions to Ford and the field.
I have served with dignity and pride, navigating the organization through uphills and triumphs. Gracefully, I take a bow and say, here I leave behind the fertile soil for those who follow to sow their skills. These are the seeds of impact. My name is Nicolette Naylor. I've served as the Regional Director for the Ford Foundation's Office for Southern Africa and as International Director for the Gender, Racial and Ethnic Justice Program. I'm inviting you to come on a journey with me as I explore some of the experiences that I've had as a leader within the Ford Foundation.
It has been a blast. You've been an amazing boss, a friend, and a mentor. I've really had a great time with you. You always made sure that everybody was seen and everybody was heard. Keep being you. Love you lots and lots.
It's been a great pleasure working under your leadership. Thank you for being a mentor and a support system when I was going through hell. I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss you, but I will.
It has been a great privilege to learn from you, to be inspired by you, to grow under your leadership. I just wanted to wish you all the best. Your legacy is broad, it's deep, and it will last a long time.
I'm very sad that you are leaving. I came to Ford to work with you, and now you're on your way out. But thank you so much for your guidance, for your feminist leadership. But I wish you only the best in your future endeavors.
Hey Nicolette, I actually can't believe that I am recording this video. I just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for your leadership, and I cannot wait to see what the future looks like for you. Thank you for redefining what it means to be a leader for me.
Boss, hello boss. You will always be my boss, as I've always said. And I want to say good luck to you in your new endeavors. Blessings and love. Peace.
Hi Nicolette, we've literally known each other for the shortest time, but all the memories that we've shared together will stay in my heart for a very long time. Thank you so much for all that you have done in the sector. Thank you for doing it for Black women, and thank you for the expert power. We can't wait to see you on big stages, and all the best.
It was an honor working with you. All the best for the future, and thank you for your leadership. One thing I can appreciate is how Nicolette brought me in as part of the Ford family, even though I was just a service provider. She's been a great inspiration, and all I want to say is good luck to your future and everything you do. Tell Cullen that I miss him and he must call me.
In Xhosa, we've got a saying, "Amake babonana, bobuya babonane." So I'm gonna see you around, just to say I wish you happiness, success, and lots of relaxation after Ford.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you, but I am with you in spirit as we celebrate a remarkable, extraordinary, brilliant, indefatigable woman I admire, adore, and love. Nicolette has been someone I have turned to time and time again for counsel, wisdom, and fellowship. I can't wait to hear about what comes next for you. Thank you, dear Nicolette, and sending love from East 43rd Street in Manhattan.
Nicolette, I am so lucky to have worked closely with you since 2013 when I first began at the Ford Foundation. I've seen you do amazing work, and I've watched you gain increasing confidence as a leader across multiple roles in those years, from SPO to RD to director of GRAJI, and now to being really a global feminist. So I just want to tell you thank you, to let you know how much I love you and admire you. So thank you for your leadership and your friendship and all your contributions to Ford in the field.
I have served with dignity and pride, navigating the organization through uphills and triumphs. Gracefully, I take a bow and say, here I leave behind the fertile soil for those who follow to sow their skills. These are the seeds of impact. My name is Nicolette Naylor. I've served as the Regional Director for the Ford Foundation's Office for Southern Africa and as International Director for the Gender, Racial and Ethnic Justice Program. I'm inviting you to come on a journey with me as I explore some of the experiences that I've had as a leader within the Ford Foundation.
Okay, so the idea is now that we have a little bit of a conversation which Halima will be facilitating, and over to you, Halima. We're not hearing you, Halima. No.
Hello.
Thank you, everybody. So I don't think I can even begin to recap the earlier conversation, but some big things that are coming out. Should we really be calling it philanthropy? What does accountability in philanthropy really look like? How do we navigate the activist how do we navigate the tension of being an activist within the philanthropic system? And we were having a conversation now with Jessica, Becky, and Jacob around some of the changes that have happened in the space and recognizing that there are some shifts, but then also how do we make those shifts the norm rather than the exception? How do we use our power in ways that respect identity, priorities, and pace of those at the brunt of the work? What does it mean to have political philanthropy? Pumi, you talked about the difficulty with the term around ceding power, and I'd love that we go into that a little bit more. Nicolette, you talked earlier about pretzels, and in some of your writing, how we contort both ourselves and force our partners to contort as pretzels. And then Ashley, you talked a little bit, amongst many other things, around what does solidarity mean, and how do we go into the space with no agenda? So with some of those questions and framings around Pumi, I want to come to you first and ask you to talk a little bit more about collective organizing and collective agency and the role that philanthropy plays in that space, or the role philanthropy should be playing in that space.
Thank you so much, Halima, about that. It was a beautiful first take. As most of you will know, I am part of Just Associates. It is a global feminist movement building support network, and we work across 3 regions: Southern Africa, Mesoamerica, and Southeast Asia. One of the interesting things I think Mama Grasa elevated in the last set is this notion of philanthropy not just being about money, not just being about grant making, but about seeing more so about what is needed in the moment to support localized organizing. And from where we part, I think one of the things that is missing is that our context is shifting all the time. We have never been in more crisis globally than we are at this moment. We have never faced the type of, I could say mess, but we see it in different ways, even across the continent, right? In this country, I won't even mention on which steroids we are on at this moment. But the thing about, I think the critical thing for us is, given this shifting context, what does it mean to have equal relationships that can recognize that what might have been the problem last year might have actually drastically shifted in this moment. And that this has not to do with, I like that you lived strategic thinking, I like it too. But that in that, it requires us constantly to engage with what is the context telling us in this moment, and who is actually making those analyses around what the context is telling us. And so for me, of course, rooted and continuing to value women, LGBTI folks, sex workers, all of us on the margins, who actually continue to organize in the most localized way. And why this is so important, it's because problems are understood best at that level. The solutions are understood best at that level. And therefore, when we think about building relationships, bringing intermediaries, bringing, analysts, desktop researchers, which I do myself sometimes, it begs the question, right, of to what extent are we able to convene in a way in which participation and representation tests in the first of who is in the room. I like that you said all of us here hold power. We are privileged because, we can get to this point of, but that is one fundamental thing that I think it's important to hold: context, strategy. The second thing for me, which I think is important for us to consider, is of course how we value the diverse and sometimes challenging ways in which civil society, social movements, CBOs, support groups, and so on, that we don't have one theory of change, right? There are so many diverse strategies and tactics that get employed in relation to change making. To what extent is that valuing of that diversity, and at which point are we engaging with, not facilitated by funders, but creating those cross-movement, cross-issue spaces that enable a minimum shared contextual analysis that can say, at least from this space, this is what people in this area are thinking, and this is valuing the contribution from the different types, as opposed to saying, the LGBTs are there and the environmental issues don't affect them. GBV, we're going to solve it because we approach it from a place of a blue eye. No disrespect, right? But that actually, structural violence, it's probably the one thing. I know there's a lot of, we invoke justice. It's something we still have to debate, right? Our notions of justice, we still need to debate them. I won't go to how our many friends are challenging us in relation to the notion of justice. But the valuing that each organized, deep-rooted, ideal, action, movement, organization, it's also worthy of participating in a cross-movement, cross-issue type of space that can enable us to actually advance. Because sometimes I think we make assumptions that this money is gonna be always there. And the critical thing is, in this mess, in these crises that keep developing, to what extent is it that we can think about the role of philanthropy in actually hearing the solutions that we want to make? I'd like to work myself out of a job. I don't want to only think like 10-year co-funding so that I have a job. I'd like to think about 10-year co-funding so that I solve the problems, So that is the second point that I think it's fundamental to bring. I mean, there has been a lot of moves that have been made, particularly from Ford, whether it's the build, whether, core unrestricted funding and so on. But there is this thing about trust, right? There is this thing about trusting Black people, trusting Black women, trusting queer people to actually know better. Trusting us to actually make or address the types of ills that relate to how structural violence continues to push us to the margin. Now, when we say that, we are not diminishing accountability, you know? Because sometimes it's like the one is put against the other. And how it perpetuates these northern Western notions of like Africa is corrupt, Africa is, you know, we always need to be careful about how philanthropy feeds that, feeds how we are unworthy, how we are stupid, how we don't know how to address, we don't know our problems. So someone needs to come and tell us about our problems. The fourth thing I think that is fundamental, and possibly it's related to the second one, and one feels it most on this continent, where when the idea of facilitating our partners in the same room to talk, how problematic that feeds actually the divides between NGOs, social movements, and CBOs. And in this continent, it is particularly a concern because it does come with a power over that, a power over an NGO could have a power over a social movement. But philanthropy feeds that. And I think it is critical that we are able to facilitate spaces in which we can have conversations, because outside of philanthropy, the competition is gone, you know? And we need to grapple with actually some of the, not only the ills that have come, whether through EPAs, you know, historical. I think there's a part of the history of how we became organized as civil society into NGO, that there's a lot to draw from that history in relation to the crises that we have faced in relation to northern funding, you know, northern donor funding in relation to how it has destroyed social organizing and social movements in South Africa, by and large, you know. I won't talk about which movements don't exist anymore in this country, that we, yeah. And I think the fifth thing that I think it's important to lift here is really to think about some of us who are seriously thinking about what it means to build and strengthen movement infrastructure for the long haul, you know, because movement infrastructure is not only about making sure that there's an office, there are the equipment, there's, you know, the running. Movement infrastructure also relates to knowledge, also relates to giving movements time to actually deepen their solidarity networks, their safety networks, because more and more we are seeing that activists, especially those on the front lines, are possibly facing the most risks than ever before. The vanishing, the kidnapping, and the what. And the response to that is not to move an activist out of their community and send them to the UK for 6 months, you know, and completely ignore actually what it means, that uprooting. So when we say movement infrastructure, let us invest in movement infrastructure. Of course, there is the money, but it is beyond the money. It is the ideas, the support networks, the safety. Safety has taken another dimension, the definition of safety in the last while. So of course, the other basic things which, you know, you've written so much about, you know, long-term, trusted, core funding, fundamental. Trust movement to actually know where the solutions lie, enable movements, you know, to define the priorities that are not just related to the strategic framework of the Ford Foundation, you know, that are related to movement needs, that are related to localized organizing. And finally, I think on this round, I think we have to revisit deeply our feminism being an ideal for society, we have to revisit what we think about transformation, and in this sense, particularly transformative power, which is not ceding power to, but recognizing that the power within and the power within the powerful lies exactly with the peoples, not with institutions that should. And yeah, I think I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pumi. I want to talk a little bit more about actually this notion of ceding power, shifting power versus supporting collective versus building power and building power. Yeah. And you talked earlier about how it is important to bring people into a room, into a space where there is no agenda. And what does that mean for how the power dynamic plays out? What does that mean for how philanthropy needs to be engaging? Can you talk a little bit about that experience, but also some of the tensions and contradictions that come up in that?
You don't ask easy questions. I think that's why I hate the log frame so much, is because it assumes that you know what the end result is going to be. How can you possibly know that unless you're a soothsayer or a sangoma or somebody who can divine what the gods have in mind for us? So when you go into a conversation with no agenda, it means that you are opening yourself up to discovering insights that you didn't know were there. So you don't preconceive the solution. You find a level of comfort in not knowing, because not knowing allows you, I think, to be more open to the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience of those who survive every day. There's no researcher that can put a finger on what it takes for marginal people who are on the margins, to survive their marginalization every day. So you go in with the sense of not knowing. I have a personal view on some of the challenges of movement building, because I think that we come with all the years of experience of being in civil society, of being activists. I know, I used to yearn for the days of the UDF, because it was just the best organization ever, And you had, how many times people tried to revive the UDF? I loved Sangoko, the NGO coalition, when I worked there for exactly 1 year until the politics kicked me out. But how many people have tried to revive a Sangoko? Because we always apply the lens of what we know, and it closes us off to the unknown. But if you're comfortable with the unknown, it means that you can explore. I was appointed as a change manager to manage a consultative process in 2016. We did not know that Act Ubumbano would be the end result. And it took a lot of courage for people to suspend their preconceived notions of what struggle is about. And it was only when that was done in an honest way that you were able to actually dream of a different reality. I don't know if that answers, but I don't have the answer. I'm happy in the unknown.
Path to an answer. I want to link that, Nicolette. You've been writing a lot about decolonizing philanthropy. And there's a problematic with that conversation in the way in which it is happening right now. Because there's still an agenda. We're brought into a room that has a specific agenda and a specific narrative that's been set by others outside of us. Talk about agenda setting within that framing.
Thanks, Halima. This has been a great conversation. I think I worry about, and many have warned us about, using the frame of decolonization loosely without being willing to do the really hard work. And I think if we want to think about decolonizing philanthropy, we have to be prepared to completely overhaul the system. And that's an unsettling process. It's an uncomfortable process. And it's a long journey that one goes on. It's not using decolonization as an and plus, so we're saying social justice, human rights plus decolonization. It's completely reimagining social justice and our lexicon around justice and human rights. And so I worry when we use that language as a disruptor without, I think we need to return to Fanon if we want to talk about decolonization, and we have to own our history, and we have to learn from, and actually sit, and everyone has a role to play, because I think we all implicated. And when the colonizers did their work on this continent, they did it in a way that impacted on all of us around divide and control and exploit and extract. And it continues to persist, the after effects of colonization. So it's impacted on the way civil society organizes itself, but it's had a fundamental impact on philanthropy and the development agenda. The white savior model and the model of Europeans coming to civilize Africa and coming to save Africa, one can look at charitable things coming from Europe that has followed that kind of trend and that kind of thinking. And so I think owning the painful past and embarking on the unknown and saying, what does a truth-telling process look like? Where one starts to say, this is how philanthropy has been rooted in. The exploitation and extraction of wealth. I think we've grappled with that in Ford. We've seen Darren talk about the new gospel of wealth, where you're saying Ford Motor Car Company made a lot of money off the money that you made in factories. I think what Mackenzie Scott has been doing, can we just, like Mackenzie Scott, saying the money that I got through a divorce, the money that Amazon has made, that has made me a multi-billionaire, has been off the backs of an exploitative practice. And so my duty as a wealthy person is to redistribute wealth. Because then you get into a redistribution agenda. It's not a transactional grant relationship where the giving of money is, it's not my money and I'm giving it to you and I want a report next year. I'm gifting the money to you because I have a duty to redistribute the wealth that I've made, and I see a connection between the problem society faces. We're all connected. I want to try to help, but I'm so privileged. I don't know how to help. So I'm going to gift you this money, and I'm going to trust you that you know best how to do it. And if we start to think about money in a redistributive model, it starts to challenge us on our reporting framework, it starts to challenge us on our monitoring framework, it starts to challenge us on our notion of putting communities at the center. Because we always say, and I think Pumi made this point, we say if you engage in trust-based philanthropy, accountability goes out the window. But we need to reimagine accountability. What does accountability look like in a model where we're taking into account, or we're applying a decolonial analysis to it? And we're saying this is about, we're sitting down and having a truthful conversation, and we're redefining a relationship between funder and grantee. What does an equal partnership look like? Let's both be accountable to each other. At the moment, accountability runs in one direction. You account for the money. So Mackenzie Scott says you don't need to send a report. I'm going to give you $5 million as a feminist movement, and you're not going to report back to me afterwards on it. And we're not going to have a complicated drafting of proposals mechanism. I'm going to just trust you and do my homework myself and not make you go and do a whole lot of proposal writing. And we saw Jack Dorsey did a similar thing with his spreadsheet. I mean, problems with the Dorsey Twitter model. But I do think you have wealthy people that are grappling with this notion of
We'll do our research and we'll have a phone call with you and we'll give you $10 million and there won't be a thing about a report and returning money after a year you haven't spent the money. It feeds a dependent cycle. So a re-established accountability framework would look like, so let's imagine a site visit. So civil society goes and do a site visit to the Ford Foundation building, a monitoring visit where you ask questions of Ford. You know, when we come, we want to meet the CEO, we want to meet the board chair, we want to meet this one, we want to ask you, how did you do this? No one is doing that with philanthropy. What does that mutual monitoring and questioning and truth-telling look like to get to a place and say, well, you know, you speak about putting communities in the center, tell us how you're putting communities in the center and let's us assess that. And I do think civil society has a lot of power. Without civil society, I've seen this with the Black Feminist Fund. You all know I've been involved with the Black Feminist Fund. It's been amazing for them to say, you know, funders, you have a sexy topic or the launch of a new organization and then all the funders want to fund you. And for the Black Feminist Fund to say, no, thank you, we don't want your money because we want money that's unrestricted and that respects us and is going to free us up. And that's hard for a funder who's like, but my board wants, Nicolette, my board wants me to fund them, get them to take our money. Imagine if you had cohorts of African civil society saying, we're coming up with a Kopenhagen Declaration, we're organizing, these are the terms on which we want to engage with the big 5 US foundations. We want to meet with the presidents. We want to have the conversation around what does accountability look like? What does centering communities look like? What does an analysis around social justice philanthropy look like for us? And what does an assessment of harm look like? I think civil society has been wonderful in developing reports and data on the harm caused by the corporate sector. Are we doing an analysis of the harm that's caused when every 5 years we shift strategy? And we decimate a sector, and a sector dies, social movements die. There's no accountability, there's no reparations that's happening around, well, here's your tie-off grant. If we start thinking about this in terms of a decolonial analysis, you'd start thinking about what does reparations look like for the harm that's been caused when we change our minds. And I do think that it's not, and it's a sector-wide conversation. It's not a one foundation conversation or one person conversation. But I think civil society holds power and civil society needs to push. I don't think we can be in echo chambers where we talk and complain about how awful the log frame is. We need collective solidarity where everyone is pushing back on. And social justice philanthropy prides itself on not having a log frame. But we use similar language around, tell me about your outcomes and your indicators. We don't do log frames, but we want to know your outcomes and indicators. There needs to be some kind of solidarity around what does a useful conversation look like and what is philanthropy struggling with? What are the pressures philanthropy struggles with that it needs to meet needs? And I don't think it's coming from where people are saying, let's screw with civil society. Let's find a way to really mess them up with our proposal writing and our reporting structures. But meeting each other halfway is going to require that authentic conversation where civil society is not just acting as we coming to apply for money, but having that critical discourse and pushing back and saying, no, this is not the way you're going to engage in our region. We want a different conversation and a different narrative. Sorry, I went on there. I was doing a mum crusher.
There's lots of things I want to follow up on, but I want to pause for a minute, for a few minutes to open up this conversation more broadly to the room. Thoughts, reflections, insights, questions, all of the above. Any takers? Lorenzo, do you have a mic?
Riyad has a mic. Let Riyad go first.
Okay, sorry.
Riyad,
okay, sorry. Riyad's got the mic. Riyad, can we start with you?
And
then Lorenzo after.
Thanks.
don't know really where to start, because I've really found the first session wonderful, and it becomes much more easier to understand why Samora and Madiba in his later years stood fast when you hear someone like Grassa speak and interrogate stuff. But, I just want to chart my journey with the Ford Foundation, you know, coming from a tradition of radical socialist politics. You know, it's like when I used to hear the word Ford in the 1980s, I would get up my crucifix, actually, you know, evil incarnate. And there's a really good book that's just come out, actually, called White Malice by Susan Williams, which looks at the nexus of organizations which really attempted to repress the liberation movements in Africa from Ghana onwards. And Ford obviously looms large there. Then my next interaction with Ford was through Gail Gearhart's, through WITS, and working with her a bit and working at her home, and then getting to meet John and stuff, and realizing the type of director that Ford puts in place at that stage. You know, it was still the sort of career NGO sort of diplomat type. And then Alice Brown, which was a complete breath of fresh air. But for many, you know, and then Nikki, who made history, the first South African director, first African director of Ford Foundation. And my first interaction was Nikki, after meeting her, after a few years of emailing her, asking for a bit of travel grant money for a film festival we used to run. And, you know, we needed to start meeting our donors because the crunch was coming, and I thought, no, let's meet. And then Nikki came in, and here was this black woman, Cape Townian, from my hometown, and it was a conversation which felt very free-flowing, and I didn't feel the power dynamics, and it was really wonderful to meet and just explore. But that brings me to Cape Town and the import of ideas, because Cape Town's a port city, and it's always had a very free-flowing, you know, lots of influences from around the world. And for the best part of the 20th century, really, it was the heart of intellectual activity and development in South Africa. And we produced some brilliant intellectuals and very radical movements. And Nikki, and I'm sure her father's thinking, is a part of the product of that intellectual development that took place. And it's really, I think, you know, we've given what Pumi talks about in terms of the nature and the scale of and intensity of the crisis, nuclear proliferation, massive problems with food supplies, petrol, cost of living, the climate crisis, the health crisis, the massive fights around race and so on. I think the thinking that we need to start applying to the contradictions which are emerging becomes much more important. And I want to use the example of Black Lives Matter. I see it's mentioned here. The influx of the millions of dollars, and Ford helped along in that process, into the Black Lives Matter actually destroyed it. Money was put into what was essentially a network, the biggest single movement in America, incredibly important, incredible advances. But what was that structured on? Where was the organization? Where was the people's organization? And this goes back to the point Ashley makes. Actually, I don't think, hashtags or loose networks can actually stay accountable to their constituency in any real shape or form in the long run. And the moment you pump millions of dollars into them, they go awry. So we have the three founders of the BLM saying, okay, this is what the BLM is. It's a problem when we haven't got that, that level of organizational accountability. It's difficult in the period because our organizations are probably as weak as they've ever been, not only in South Africa, but internationally. And it's a problem with social movements. I don't want to start naming organizations here. But, if they're not related and based on, democratically organized structures which are rooted in communities, in workplaces, in colleges and universities, we're going to have problems. And I think I just want to end on, try and round that up a bit. And I think the intensity of the crisis means that we're going to see many more opportunities that were presented, like with Marikana, with the Fees Must Fall movement, where intense struggles break out. And the ability of the donor community to respond to that, I think, is critical. We used to have the multi-agency grants initiative, and I know the campaign I was involved with, we managed a 3-page form and we got R1 million. We managed to keep that money going for 2.5 years. We never paid a salary, never paid rent. It was all on mobilization because of the networks of organizations that were involved in it. And I think that's key. How can we support, those organizations coming together, breaking down those silos, which I still saw very much in operation during the COVID pandemic, where people go, oh no, that's our turf and our turf. So let me just finally come in. I think but back to Nikki, I love to tell the story where, she's asked me to do a film about extractivist mining, and 6 months later, I'm really depressed. I can't find the story. I've traveled all over the global south, and then a few days, the last days of those 6 months, I find myself in Marikana following the strike, and very quickly she manages to, she wanted to get some of the film money in Ford going into the global south, and hardly any of it was going. So I felt particularly guilty because she'd given me a decent grant to develop something. And that is, in a way, just that was a moment, and there are going to be other moments, emancipatory moments, where people break out of their parochial struggles, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's a massacre, whether it's a high debt crisis, whether it's a cost of living crisis, and so on. And I think that's where we've got to start really focusing our efforts, because in those struggles that are emerging and often explode is where people really start groping towards shaping their own destiny in a much more defined manner, where they can begin to shape the vision of the future society that we need to propose the solutions and the alternatives to the horror people and the brutality of structural violence they're facing in their life. And finally, I think, the last danger of donor funding is you're sitting in chairs of power, right? Now the question is acknowledging what that power can do to you, how it can very easily co-opt you into a system which is full of misery and horror, and where you're just playing the game rather than using it to challenge the power, which I thought was the big takeout of the earlier discussion for me, is actually subverting the money, subverting the paradigm, so we actually begin to get real and get our hands dirty with all the contradictions and the mess we're faced with.
Thank you, Riyad. Lorenzo?
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for this panel. I have a question. I mean, I think, Nicolette, you brought up Mackenzie Scott, right? And I think that she's been shaping the field of philanthropy in the US, where they're all sort of shaking in their boots a little bit, right? Especially rich people, in the way that she's giving money away very easily, upfront. The question I have is that she's also been critiqued, right, on transparency. And so while we all know, for example, that there's consulting companies that are used in terms of where that finds organizations that she funds, there's no real open process in that regard, right? And so I appreciate Mackenzie's ability to take critique. I think Pumi's there, JAS Associates wrote a critique as well as Frida Fund. Really strong critiques against receiving Amazon money, but and saying what they're going to do with that. And she took that, but at the same time, I feel like one of the conversations we're also not having in sort of private foundation philanthropy, and I am an employee at a private foundation myself, is that about transparency. And I think that it's been subtly mentioned on some parts of the panel, who gets selected, how those decisions are made, we're accountable to a board. But further aspects of transparency that we're not talking about is things like, where does money come from? The Ford Foundation, the foundation I work for, has been endowed by certain people, both in the auto industry, but they're long gone, right? That money is no longer coming from them, and we don't have any idea about where those investments come from. What are thoughts about what that looks like? Because we're talking about a sort of decolonial position or praxis of grant making and funding. We also need to talk about what systems are we actually perpetuating that actually oppresses us through our investments. So thanks.
Gentleman in the front.
I do have a union voice, so I don't really require a mic. Hi everyone, my name is Mandisa Kanyile from an organization called Rise Up Against Gender-Based Violence. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you, Nicolette. Thank you. You know what I'm thanking you for, but thank you. My question is really around the issue of unrestricted funding. Not just unrestricted funding, but funding that is responsive. And I think we all know I'm referring to what has happened in the past 3 years with the pandemic and how organizations have had to structure their programs and have had to change the way in which they work, and how that's affected their ability to report, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we were fortunate as an organization around that we kind of thrived through COVID because we were able to not only respond, but actually expand the work that we do during that time. But how do organizations that are as young as ourselves, that only have 2 audits under our belt, go out into the world of philanthropy and say, we want, as you were saying, in demand, unrestricted funding, and we would like to be able to be responsive to crisis. And when there's floods, for example, in KZN, and there's women and babies that need to be responded to, for us to be able to say, let's move this, because right now that is what the urgent need is. And let's not necessarily focus so much on the things that we said we were going to do, because right now, this is where the crisis is at. I'm not obviously advocating for chopping and changing and moving away from strategies, but I just think that philanthropic organizations are so set in their ways around, you said you're gonna do this, deliver this, whether the world is crashing around you, I still want this thing delivered. And it's very difficult for young organizations such as ourselves to be able to operate in that kind of environment and still be authentic to the kind of work that we want to do on the ground. Thank you so much.
Comment, and then we have to close it off.
Thank you very much. My name is Shamiso Mtisi from Zimbabwe. I work with the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, ZELA. We are based in Zimbabwe. Mine is a comment. I think in terms of the level of flexibility that comes with Ford Foundation support. Nicolette has been one of the key drivers of this concept and idea from the time we got to know her as Zella. I think it has allowed us over the years to pursue programs and goals or activities that ourselves as an organization we designed and sent or proposed. And that level of flexibility is important. We interacted with Nicolette at a time when, if I remember well, the Ford Foundation was going to end our 2-year program. I think that was around 2008, 2007. So we visited Nikki and at the Ford Foundation Bramfontein Center office when they were still there. And we had a very frank discussion. She told us, guys, the Ford Foundation is considering giving you a tie-off grant. And you really have to come up with something innovative. So she gave us a second chance. And what did we do? Went back and then started thinking about how can we transform our programming? How can we make our programming more relevant to current issues and the current situation in the country and in the region? So we introduced the concept around inequality rise within the natural resources sector. And the rest is history. It shaped our programming, and it also shaped even the programming in other countries by other civil society groups. I know many groups that were inspired by that kind of work. The reason why I'm saying that is because Nikki gave us the platform. She gave us the opportunity to innovate and to inspire other groups as well. So I think I want to appreciate on behalf of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association and the support that we got from the Ford Foundation and Nicolette over these years. We highly appreciate. Thank you, Nikki.
I wish we had time for more, but unfortunately, Tugat is shaking his head. Tugat, do we have time for one more? Okay, one last one. There's somebody at the back.
This one, yeah.
Hi, I'll try and be really brief. Nicolette, it's such an honor to be in the same room as you. You've really paved the way for many young people of color and women in the sector. I've recently joined the philanthropic sector after sitting on the other side of the equation for a very long time. I wondered if you could maybe tell us, in your 16 years of experience, speaking about decolonization and thinking, I hope, about intersectional praxis within philanthropic organizations, but also within civil society movements. What do you think the place is of intersectionality when we start looking at thematic work? Because the people that we work with have bread and butter issues that don't stop at one issue alone. And so we in the philanthropic space, now myself included, it's very awkward, we kind of push our grantees to go in a particular direction, they report on a particular thing, and I'll never forget, I went to go and meet with a partner of ours in the Western Cape a few years ago, and she's a trans woman leading a trans organization, and she said to me, I don't know how to explain to a funder that fish oil makes our lives easier because I need to cook for the women that come through my house. And I don't know how to explain to grantees why fish oil is not part of what we can fund.
I think much of this conversation is going to have to continue in the hours that follow, but if I can ask each of you to take one of the conversations. Transparency, how does philanthropy respond to the moment we're in? Does philanthropy give the money and leave? Or does it find ways of providing solidarity after it's given the money, I think? And then how do we deal differently, or how do we think differently around what intersectionality demands of us? quick round, and then we have to end because the next part is
Okay,
starting.
you go first.
Kumi.
I would have loved to also hear the sister who's now walking away. You know, I really think, yeah, because we had like 4, and the sister had her hand up, and I really think I would have loved to hear what you have to contribute.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
It's okay, not a problem. Let me just place this here quickly. So my name is Leila Kitui, and I am from the African Tax Administration Forum. So we are not a civil society. We are an intergovernmental organization run by African revenue authorities. My colleague, who's actually here with me, is from the Ghana Revenue Authority. So our approach towards the relationship with our funders as development partners, that's what we call them, is a bit different from a lot of the civil society organizations. So just giving you a bit of context, I've equally come from a previous civil society orientation and relationship to that approach of how, you know, civil society relates with its foundations or its development partners as it may be. And looking at the approach that we have now vis-a-vis the approach that a lot of civil societies have is, I think the conversation that Nicolette was having with, you know, Mama Michelle before is that we as Africans need to be able to set our agendas, you know, and I think it's reaching a point in time where we need to take ownership of our direction. I know one of our biggest concerns comes into who's going to fund me and who's going to support me, but once we set up our own agendas, is only then will they understand what our true cause or true pinches actually are. And I'm saying this from a position where, as an African Tax Administration Forum, our duty is to ensure that our states have the resources for them to be able to manage our citizenry, you know, to be able to provide the basic services with the social contract that we keep speaking about. And in that direction, what we had to do is go through an evaluation of ourselves to see what do our members need, you know, what do our members require from us, and not be, well, in the lack of a better word, dictated by our sponsors and the services that they require or the accountabilities that they actually need. And that made us go back into the drawing board. And what that meant for us is that if you set up your own agenda, the money will come. This, because I listened to the notion where I know you'd also mentioned that what we've also seen, and I think Nicolette mentioned it before, is that some of our civil societies are actually closing shop because the funding is not coming. You know, the topics we're creating may not be sexy enough. But when somebody realizes that you have a problem and that problem needs support, only then will they actually support you. But the idea where we constantly shift our agenda from moving from, livestock harvesting all the way to drug issues is not going to help you. Because at the end of the day, you also need to be able to appreciate your own internal skill set to be able to actually be accountable to provide the services that you need. So I'm just throwing it back onto the board that as civil societies and as NGOs and as foundations, as we actually sit, we need to appreciate the uniqueness of everyone's agenda in the room. We need to appreciate that the reasoning behind where we sit is particular to the environment that we work into, and that we need to be able to come back into a space together. And maybe lastly to say that when Nicolette was also talking about the relationship of philanthropy, where we speak about who's a giver and who's a taker, needs to be relooked at. None of us are givers and none of us are actually takers. And maybe it also answers the question that he was speaking about, that what is a true source of funding? We don't need to go into the politics around who's a funder, where the money actually comes into, but we always need to understand, as Africa, we sit with 65% of the world's ability to reproduce. 65. And I'm not talking just about a portion. The global world production comes from Africa. The resources come from Africa. So if we realize our true value as Africa, that we come with the money, and eventually that money is churned or translated or blockchained into a different format, only then will we realize our true value to be able to appreciate the relationship we do have with our development partners. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting very, very strong looks, so final thoughts, very quick final thoughts, and then we'll have to just continue this conversation.
Thanks for allowing that. Very final thoughts. I am sorry that Rehad invoked movement for Black lives in the way in which he invoked movement for Black lives. I won't even attempt to respond to what he says, but I think for our conversation, I think what's important to underscore is that movement building work is not easy, you know? And we know it because we are deeply embedded in movement building work. And parts of it has to do with how we are in relationship with each other. As we are also thinking about what strategies and tactics are important to, you know, to pursue to win what we have set ourselves. So in that way, part of the way in which one puts in the space about democratically elected, you know, the systems are in place, like what Mandisa is battling with. We don't have an audit, therefore we are not fundable, and so forth. It's largely because what it does is philanthropy and donors and those that analyze movement actually scratch what it actually means to build a movement. And I think that is so important to keep, you know, as we think about what it means to actually, you know, invest in movement infrastructure. That's the first thing. The second last thing, I think for me, that is important, also maybe linked to Lorenzo, power is shifting all the time. You know, whilst the sources may look like this today, they may look like that, but I think you're raising a fundamental question that we will continue to raise. The last thing I think I will say in the interest of time is that we haven't even begun to grapple with the effects of COVID and what it's going to mean for a conversation like we are having right now. COVID is not over, of course, but we haven't begun to even think about what is the toll that we have carried, that lives in our body, that is going to, and what is that going to mean for organizing, reorganizing, shifting, and so on, you know? Whilst we pivoted, right? It was the in-word, buzzword, whilst we did that, but there's a lot that's going to be needed, not because there's the next wave and the next wave and the next wave and monkeypox and what, but that just like the way we are thinking about what colonialization did, what slavery did, and how it lives in our body, what is it going to imply going forward? And last thing, the material needs of our people are real. You know, we won't be urgent action funds, but we do need to really, really think about what it means, not to just respond to crisis, but to respond to the needs as identified. And that doesn't sit in the core support, that doesn't sit in the, you know, plan for the year, but it sits at the unknown.
Thank you, Pumi. Ashley?
I'll never pass up an opportunity to say something, even though I think a lot of the questions relate specifically to philanthropy. Perhaps two comments. I enjoyed the comment about intersectionality. People don't live compartmentalized lives. So our funders always ask us if we have, what are we doing on gender, what are we doing on environment? We kind of cook the books, we make it up as we go. We say, well, people is women who are doing climate mitigation stuff in the east of Zimbabwe. Cool, that's a climate thing. And we count it again when we give the report on the gender thing. It's a crock, it's rubbish. It doesn't make any sense, right? That's not what people are struggling for. We try and engage with the lived reality and let people determine what it is they need support for. It's not always money either. So I think that's something that we've got to always push back with any philanthropic or development aid or bilateral partner, we've got to call them out. We've got to call BS on that and say it doesn't make sense, it's dumb. The second, I forgot my second point. It's for the best.
I wanted to, Mandisa was asking quite a practical question about how, as a new organization, how do you actually go have that conversation with a funder to say, give us unrestricted funding? And I think that's where collective power comes in. What if you had the women's rights or the GBV sector coming together to say, what is the way, how do we want to negotiate with all the women's rights funders that operate in this region? Why don't we have a conversation around our needs, what we're working on, what this looks like? Because I think there's more power, one NGO raising questions versus the Vuiswa's entire docket raising questions, sorry, Mamvi, versus the entire docket of Open Society and MOT. Like, if this is coming up, then you also empower those working in those spaces to take that up as an issue that's coming up across the board versus a disgruntled grantee. And so I think this is where the cross-issue solidarity also comes in. We have to be, I think the lessons from the right and the anti-gender movement at the moment, we have to get better at building cross-issue solidarity and cross-border solidarity. I think South African exceptionalism in this moment in the world isn't getting us anywhere. I think we need to think about Pan-African approaches and South-South approaches with other global South countries around common issues that have come to the fore, whether it's around conversations with philanthropy or around the moment that we find ourselves in and what a visioning could look like for the future. I think the issue around intersectionality is such an important one, and you've already said, I mean, Audre Lorde's thing about we don't live single issue lives. But it doesn't help us in philanthropy to just, because I worry, we have butchered that word. Everyone is speaking about intersectionality, #intersectionality, and intersectionality is a theory of power and a theory of oppression. It's not about taking different things and putting it together in a pot and saying that's intersectionality. And so I think I also put it out to the sector, our lexicon and the language we use around whether it's justice, whether it's intersectionality. We have to get clearer about what we mean and what we don't mean, and what is our way of thinking about the theory of change. Because I think, and philanthropy needs to own this, we have fueled competition. We don't want everyone to be the same and come up with the same kind of proposal. And maybe it is time where people are saying, this is a common vision that we have. We've rewarded competition where it's like my idea is better than that one's idea. And we've already seen that idea, so we're not going to fund it. Versus us saying, look, maybe innovation is funding the boring, the sameness, the decade-long, we're in it for the next 20 years kind of thing. We're not going to keep asking you. I mean, thank you, Shamiso, for what you said, but I mean, it shouldn't have to be that I was sitting with you saying, well, come up with something innovative before we continue funding you. It should be, we're going to keep doing what we're doing for the next 2 decades, and we're all going to be comfortable with that, and we're all going to be comfortable that it's not going to be sexy and new or compete with each other. So, thank you.
On that note, we are going to pause the conversation, not end it, because this conversation will continue. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Halima. Sorry that we were unruly, Halima.
Thank you to our great panel of activists and who have shared with us great wisdom. In this community, when somebody says finally, or in the interest of time, you know you are in trouble. And here we are, it's what, 5:10. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my power and give it to the next two speakers who are going to come up here. And I'm going to ask them to do the vote of thanks and the closing remarks. Because we have now come to the end, or we are nearing the end of the first session. The next session is going to start at 6 p.m. So I would like to invite Justin and Nikki to please come on stage. They are both working very closely with Nicolette, and they are at the Ford Foundation.
Thanks so much, Bongi. Hi. Yeah, so I'm gonna definitely keep to time. So I think we're not going to try to do well, I don't think we can do justice to the things that we've heard today. I think only to extend to all of you the openness on our part, because a lot of what has been raised today actually speaks to how we do our job. And so I think we want to continue those conversations. We want to have these difficult, challenging conversations with you about how we do our philanthropy, and also think collectively with you how to problem solve many of the things that were raised. But it also falls on us to thank a lot of people who made this happen. And so I would really like to thank, I know Mama Michelle has left us, but I think she really came and lit a bit of a fire, and we're always so very grateful to have her join us and speak to us in a way that holds us accountable. I think we also would really like to thank Halima, Ashley, Pumi, for your contributions and your reflections and spending your time with us today and giving us a lot to take away. We would also really like to acknowledge Shane. Mr. Naylor, thank you so much for being, must I say uncle? I think it's been an honor to have you here today, because I hope that you were able to see just a snapshot of the Nicolette that we know, but also that you are able to see what your contribution and your sacrifices have meant in terms of impact. And so I will hand it over to Nikki.
Thanks so much. And Mandisa, you can come and do a monitoring visit because Nicolette said so, right? Yeah, for me, it falls to say thank you to the OSA team. This has been a lot of hard work, a labor of love, I think, from our fearless leader, Mamviswa, who really wanted to put together something special, because you are something special to the office. And we know that you come back and visit us. We're not giving up on that. So Team OSA, I want to mention you by name because it's really important that we do. Lerato, Aya, Ayanda, where are you all sitting? Yeah, there you are, all sitting there. Lou, thank you so much for putting this together, for all of the work that you did in just putting all of this together in the way in which that you've done this with such care for everybody. And then finally, just to say thank you to everybody who's come and who's stayed here and who's been here with us today and for participating. We really do appreciate that. And I know I'm handing over now. Did I make my time? Would I?
I think you have to tell everyone that the bar is open.
Oh, I have to this is exciting. The bar is open. So thank you, everybody. Bye.
You're welcome to have a drink, but you're not welcome to leave, because we've got a session starting at 6, which includes a lot of interesting messages. So please stick around and have a good time. Thank you.
Started high, waited on the filter, sold to typify. Said she called me mister, under misty skies. Hate to get there quicker, rebel through the night. Cause I truly missed her, universal charm. Cause she thinks it's humor, and I mean no harm. Locked down. as the night awaits. I can see her sleeping, stare down mistake. Does she know my secret? I'm in love with her.